Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. Thank you very much to the organizer for inviting me to be part of this second ICELAM, International Conference on Educational Leadership and Management, Resilient Leadership in the New Normal of Education. I'll be sharing today the ideas of Covidizations and resilience, shaping the new norms. In my abstract, what I'm trying to say is to somehow look at the impact of Covidizations and how is giving effect to the concept of resilience, which I'm trying to argue that is shifting the ideas to a different level in the process of shaping the new norms, because everyone's talking about norms nowadays, yeah, but not many effort of trying to somehow defining what is the new norms and what is the kind of process that lead to that process of new norms. Yeah. My argument here is that Covidization has led to a process whereby the need for resilient leadership become more important and stronger, and the past model of education is something that is not untenable anymore. Yeah. So resilient is a default, and not only that, yeah, resilient leadership qualities is giving impressions that giving an impact that the leaders has to fix the plane while it flies, because this is an ongoing process whereby the challenge, the uncertainty that is happening under the pandemic is very affecting us very much. So Covidization here also implies that learning is an issue of social and economic security in a very fragile health conditions. And that's what I define as living under the process of Covidizations. The other argument that I try to put here is that resilient as a character, as a quality, or as a competency is something that is challenging if you were to inculcate or you were to shape that character under the current condition of online approach, because you can't do so much of like try to really be hands-on in facing the uncertainties out there, the change, the challenge out there. So how do we develop all these things while we are doing all this online? Yeah. And further to that, yeah, what I try to argue is that here, under the pandemic and the COVID era, we see that the challenge of resilient or building resilient competencies is actually looking even more to the aspect of individual qualities. And because of individual qualities that we talk about, then we are looking at the values of compassion, empathy, further highlight the importance of managing and leading with heart. Yeah, this is what I mean here when we talk about the emphasis, the stronger emphasis of resilience to be looking at the component of individual competencies. And finally, what I'm trying to preach for here is that this is where you need the local and intrinsic concept of leadership of our own, that is structural leadership. So let me go to the first one. Yeah, I've got 4 points here. What does it mean? What is the argument for Covidizations as a reset button for resilient education leadership? Yeah. In this context, what I mean by Covidizations is the unraveling of the manifold, far-reaching medical, economic, and social impact of a global health emergency. And here, if you compare to the impact of globalization, the impact of Covidization is even deeper. Yeah. As cause and effect. So because of that, you will see that an example of social distancing is one of the impact of Covidization. While my argument here is that it's not about social distancing, it's about physical distancing. You can't be distancing them socially. That's what make the criteria, that's what make the character of resiliency among either the students or we ourselves as leaders. And the argument for resetting is very clear, is very obvious. It's even more obvious now. Yeah, we cannot just go back to the time that we had before. Why? Because if you look at the statistic, yeah, there are at least 1.38 billion, not million, billion of students are being affected because of the closure of the school. Yeah? And then 6.7 million are suffering from wasting. Yeah? And 1.5 billion children have been out of school. So imagine this is the kind of scenario. We definitely cannot go back to the original conditions like we were before. But how serious we are? How are we adapting to this? Yeah? Or are we just resolved to the solutions of online, whereby now we know that the impact of this online, we are not helping into building resilience to the optimal level. And just to further emphasize that pandemic has changed education forever. How? Because the mainstream approach of going to online now, where not everyone will have access to this online, and even in fact almost 50% of the population doesn't have, students populations have no access to the internet yet. We see that there's a mainstream approach of education. So what are we doing to those who have no access? So that's why we are seeing that the education is never going to be the same. Either the developed countries will go faster in terms of online, and those who have no access will be left behind and further behind because of this. It says that Untitled report says that 95% of students in Switzerland, Norway, and Australia have computer to use for their school. Only 34% in Indonesia. Imagine 66% is not having access. It's more than majority. So what are we doing? What happened to the resilience building process? Which school has been treated as protective platforms before? Yeah? So what I'm trying to argue here is that the most important point that contribute to why that we are not going back to the same and school may become irrelevant like how it was before is that this coronavirus revealed the need to bridge the digital gap because it's getting wider and wider. Yeah. Unfortunately, this is how education system is. The education system is still shaped by the industrial revolutions model and focus on IQ, in particular memorization and standardization. Yeah. So now, when you put them online, yeah, how do we adjust this assessment system? Things as at fingertips. Yeah. For those who have access, but for those who have no access, you've got to figure out a different kind of assessments. Yeah. So this is mainly just to highlight that our education system is losing its relevance if we are just focusing on the online, not doing necessarily adjustment to those who have access. Yeah, they may use even scanning system just to find the answer. To those who have no access, they will have difficulties of even what to learn now, how to get into the schools, back to the school system environment. Yeah, so it's very clear that the pandemic has caused utterly disruptions. Yeah, for that reason, how do we develop leaders, headmasters, headmistresses of the school, how to develop the kind of resilience that is needed there. And the pandemic in total, yeah, in the context of looking at the broader perspective, has somehow created unprecedented change to the education system, and this resulting a new reality that require the new norm. Yeah. There are four components that we'll be looking at if you look at the whole impact. Yeah. The policy response, the structural response, the social response, and the financial response. Yeah, this is what we'll be looking at into the detail a bit later on. So my first round of argument is to prove that we need to reset. The higher education need to reset, and we are talking about not only how to develop that system, which is resilience, but even now, equally important is that how to develop, apart from the system, the person themselves, whether the students or the education leaders themselves, how to develop that kind of character. And are we making a difference in terms of creating these qualities or these competencies? So realities, if you look in the case of Malaysia, despite of all the concerns that we need to make sure that the students still have access and etc., but what we see happening on the ground is that there are still teachers who have to attend to those who have no access. So in those group of students, what kind of teachers that we have? Does the lecturers ready to overcome the challenge and go by themselves to visit each house, overcoming whatever challenge that come in between the student's house and the school? Yeah? This is a kind of resilience in action that we talk about. What make them What make this group of teachers who has been reported here go to undergo report to get into the about the indigenous people? So what kind of character has developed them? What kind of process have developed them? And we also received report and seeing report that 5 siblings have to use one phone in order to get access to it. So this is a case of how those who have access, but very limited access. So the kind of sharing, the kind of qualities, the kind of like togetherness among the siblings is a kind of resilient qualities that need to be there. How do we develop this kind of qualities? Does all students have these qualities in order to share with the other siblings when they have a very limited access to internet? Yeah. So the point here is that in Malaysian cases, based on the survey, there are 70% students did not have stable and sufficient internet access at home, and around 50% students did not have devices. So these are the realities. So we know these are the challenge. So what kind of resilient qualities, what kind of passions that is available, that is equipped among the lecturers, among the students, among the teachers, to somehow address these issues. We cannot just have the problem being solved by just providing and saying that we do have internet here and there. But realities on the ground, it says that 70%. Yeah. So these are what we talk about, the kind of resilience qualities among the teachers that is needed. Are we training this for them? Are we training them for this? Yeah. And we know that this is quite a classic cartoon to illustrate that all this while we have an assessment, an equal assessment to everyone, where it's just impossible. Yeah, different person would have different qualities, so we should not be having a standardized kind of assessments. But that's what happened in our examination system, in our school systems. Yeah, so here, very ironically, not only that issues of questioning the exam, the standardized exam systems, but we have reached a situation whereby even to take that standard exam, we have an issue as well, whether they have an access to internet or they don't have access to internet. So in this case, I just want to highlight that those students who really put an effort to get to internet just to sit for the exam, these are the students who I see would have a stronger resilience character than those students who are just sitting in the class or just give up when they don't have access to internet in order to sit the exam. So I would like to say in a very specific that in Malaysia, this is a kind of like two dichotomy in terms of policy structure. One is directly addressing, and in general, they are addressing those who have online classes. But what is more important is that those who have no access to internet, what are we doing specifically for this group of people? And there's different categories among this group of people. Yeah. So the first question is that, do we have specific policies for these diverse scenarios, or one policy fit all? It looks like, yes, we do have consideration to this group, but it's a major policy. Despite more than 50% doesn't have an exam, that doesn't have access to internet, we still work on a policy that push for online program. While we know that 50% are not having access or not having stable access, what are we working? What are we doing for this group of people when more than half is having this challenge? Yeah. Because that's where resilience is built in. That's where the resilience qualities can be inculcated, not just by, you can't expect much of resilience qualities when they have when they cannot go to classes. We provide online, they just sit in a very comfortable room in their home and then go and follow the class online, in comparison to the students who have to struggle to go out in order to get access to internet. So I'm referring to a very specific issues of resilience among the students, resilience among the teachers in order to accommodate the challenge. Yeah? Are the teachers trained for diverse scenarios? This is something for us to answer as well. Yeah? What happened to resilience through education and resilience for education? These are two different concepts and requires two different approaches. Yeah? How do we ensure resilience quality through online? Yeah, this is a question that I posed before. And solution for the no access students, it seems like it's taking quite some time. There have been several times been suggested that TV is one of the options for that, but it was only lately to the later part of the challenge that we start coming up seriously, how to make the education TV as a solution for this. Yeah. So ultimately, do we still need the same kind of educations given all this challenge? What kind of component, what kind of curriculum, what kind of pedagogy actually can really, which is really needed, and how do we ensure that school as an equalizer before, school as a protective platforms to develop resilience before, how do we make sure that all this curriculum is contributing to develop these kind of qualities, resilient qualities or resilience competencies. So in short, what I like to say is that our response to the pandemic still based on nostalgic knowledge. What do I mean by nostalgic knowledge? What do I mean here is that the kind of data that we have, the fact that almost 50% doesn't have internet, yeah, access to internet, or even doesn't have a device for this. So this group of people, how do we do a data analytics among them? What is the options of helping them? So we are still making our policies. We are still looking at a solution that is internet-based, that is online-based, which is only cater 50% to the students. What happened to the other 50%? Yeah. So with the demand and supply of knowledge has changed, technological and information revolution demands a different kind of education. That this answered the previous question that I put just now. Yeah, the kind of education, the kind of competency needed is a different kind of competencies, because we know the challenge is totally different now. The priorities not to go to the cognitive thing that may not necessarily needed once we are done with this COVID challenge. Yeah. What seems to be more important now is the non-cognitive skills, yeah? And also the 21st century kind of requirement. So here, what I'd like to highlight is that we need change. We need to reset the education system and the pedagogy and the content of the education system. So here, to illustrate in a quite simplified version of how to summarize the story that I've been talking about, is that what we talk about, the 20th century kind of education is now being challenged, even because we are looking at how the issues of 4M before, if we can categorize, is to looking at education as something that is to prepare the man for employment, the mind for innovations, and treating them as a machine and preparing them to work with the machines, and finally to make them employable, referring to market, yeah, and to shift that kind of educations to something that we call as developing the humanity among them, yeah, developing the heart among them, yeah, developing the character of compassion among them, and finally, we hope by shifting towards humanizing the education, we are inculcating the good values among them, which important implication from that is that we talk about the resilience qualities, right? So we are here not to talk about preparing them for the industrial need, right? Preparing them for the factory kind of like process, yeah. But what we're preparing them is to develop the character that is intangible, that is difficult to measure, but that's what is needed. Yeah? And this is what we call education with soul. So resilient-based education that I'm talking about and referring to here is shifting from the 4M or the previous one to the 4H. Yeah? And this is not something which is very new. Yeah, this is something that has been advocated for. Yeah, UNESCO is talking about pillars of learning. That is learning to know, learning to do, learning to live together, learning to be. Yeah, and then in Malaysia we talk about the national philosophy of education, which more or less reflect the same thing. Yeah, learning is not about preparing them, or education or school or universities is not preparing them for the industrial need, yeah, for the technical part only. It's inculcating among them the resilience character. What is the resilience character referring to? Not just the skill part, not just the cognitive part, is the ability to live together with others, ability to be kind of like dealing with a good, equipped with a good ethics and etc. Yeah? And then finally, if you follow the Delos Commission report to EU Commission, what is equally important is learning to transform the society. And that's what we are now. We are facing a very big challenge, but how do we transform our society so that they are more prepared in terms of facing the challenge that we are in now? Yeah. So resilient teaching in this context is the ability to facilitate learning experience. They are designed to be adaptable to fluctuating conditions and disruptions. Yeah? We're dealing with disruption, but are we preparing the students for disruption? Are we preparing the teachers? Are we training the teachers so that they can cascade the skill of being resilient when you are facing with this kind of challenge? Yeah. So for that reason, we'll see that the main agenda that is being talked about, that is being the main agenda that the international community is talking about now, is education for sustainable development. I'm saying that I'm arguing for that what is the advocacy of in education for sustainable development is equal to education for resilience, meaning that we are trying to make the students learning the skills, the competencies, the soft skill needed in order to live together, to transform the society. Yeah, to take care of the environment, to be able to face the challenge that is unpredictable, that is very uncertain. So they have the same kind of like component and approach in terms of what are they advocated for. Why? Because we cannot return to the world as it was before. So this is how a simplified point of how to build resilience education system for equitable and sustainable development. So what we mean to say here is to strengthen the resilience of education system so that we enable the countries to respond to the immediate challenge. In our case, we respond to the immediate challenge of the COVID pandemic. Yeah. And at the same time to focus on equity and inclusion, because we know that there are people who have easy access to internet, there are people who have limited access, there are people who have no internet access. So there's a lot of equity issues among this group of people. And how do we want to make the policy very inclusive? So let me share with you an example of what the international Islamic universities have done in terms of like changing the kind of curriculum and offering the kind of education that really hope to somehow develop that resilience character among the students. Let's listen to this video.
This project on HyFlex, Hybrid Flexible Transformative Learning for Edu Actions with Soul, is a learning platform to prepare students with the sustainability competencies. The current university's curriculums are too focused on knowledge and skill that we have neglected to shape the attitudes and values of our students. To bring back the actions and the soul of education, Edu Actions, IIUM has introduced a new compulsory course for our students, UNGS 1201 Sustainable Development Issues, Principles and Practices.
The course is designed for the next generation learning and skill based on the following unique approaches: transdisciplinary and integrated, formative and summative assessment, community engaged, research-based, action and solution-oriented.
So for me, this course has not only taught us about sustainability, but more importantly, the skills and competencies needed to address sustainability issues. This is done by going to the ground and engaging with the community. Like they always say, nature is the best book, society is the best teachers to teach us about values and action needed for sustainable world. During its inaugural year, UNGS 1201 has shown encouraging successes. The students have produced more than 300 projects proposals addressing various issues of sustainability inside and outside the campus. The students have published more than 20 newspaper articles sharing their ideas on sustainability challenges in the country, and hundreds of blogs and individual journals to reflect their learning experiences. Since 2019, this HyFlex project has gone through several stages, beginning with the formulations of the fundamentals, including developing the course contents, determining the course implementations, approach, and methodology, engaging both IIUM and outside communities, and the actual implementations of the UNGS 1201 course.
HiFlex Transformative Learning for Edu-Action with Soul projects has also won the International Green Gown Award 2021, highly commended project in the category of Next Generation's Learning and Skills. The success of HiFlex, especially the UNGS 1201 course, has paved the way for implementations of more sustainability initiatives in the university. More staff and students of IIUM are now involved in various sustainability-related projects. Students have become more aware and concerned about sustainability issues faced by the universities and the surrounding communities. In order to further strengthen the impact of UNGS 1201 course on education for sustainable development, 2 new courses are being developed under HiFlex projects as sequels to UNGS 1201, which involve circle of students working together with the community for sustainability projects. These 2 new courses, Usrah in Action 1 and Usrah in Action 2, will see greater community engagement, embedding ESG into courses at IIUM.
Sustainability is best learned through community engagement. Transdisciplinary learning unlocks impactful skills. Action is the heart of sustainability education.
All right. I hope from there, what I would like to highlight from there is that when we talk about building resilience among the students, even among the lecturers, among the teachers as well, it involves beyond the classroom. We've got to push that outside with the community and try to build up and try to create a process whereby they will have to interact each other not in a classroom setup. Then only we hope that we can produce a different kind of environment whereby the interactions between the individuals and the process outside, yeah, and that is how we hope the resilience can be built within that structure. So the third message that I would like to go is the core of the message of my sharing today, is that how to look at the dynamics of resilience. Yeah, we know by now that why do we need resilience? Because the challenge today, the rapid disruptive change today is normal. It's becoming normal now that resilience character is a default. Yeah. So for that purpose, we have to really make sure that the process that we are giving to the students, the process that we are training the teachers, is something that will really contribute to the process of developing resilience qualities among them. And because we know that, as I said before, Covidisation is even more destructive. Yeah. And we can somehow, based on the literature, have some ideas that there are different waves of resilience interventions, yeah, process that progress so far. Yeah, the first wave is being a bit descriptive, and then the second wave we try to explore. The third wave is the promotion of resilience through interventions, and finally, we recognize that the current wave that we are in terms of developing resilience character, resilience competencies, is that we've got to look at how the whole system is interacting with each other. And that's why I said just now from the video to illustrate that unless and until you get the students out and get the teachers out, get the leaders out with the community, for the community, together with the community, you won't be able to really build the kind of resilience character that is needed. Yeah, and we know by now the meanings of resilience in education sector is that it's not just for them to somehow learn about it, but they are supposed to be able to recover, yeah, and change the kind of learning that the kind of lesson that they learn, and change that into strategies, change that into character, change that into behavior of how they are now able to adapt and move on with the required actions and activities that need to be done. Yeah. And we know that resilience overlaps with social and emotional learning. Yeah? So that is why it's not just about the cognitive skill, it's about the non-cognitive skill that is important. And how and when do we develop this skill? It's not through the formal classroom. Yeah? It's not through the formal education. It's not so much can be done there. But that's how I said in the very beginning, what is most important to be changed is that how we approach education. Resilience and ability to recover following adversity. So let them go out and face the challenge. It's not to say that, for example, now to get the students, for example, to get the human being to go out and risk themselves to quarantine to COVID to the virus. But what we need to do, how we can prepare them by setting up an environment, allowing them to somehow go directly in a way that they know how to handle it. Yeah? What I'm trying to say here is that a continuous quarantine from the realities out there would not develop the actual character that is needed. So from there, they cannot be able to somehow learn a lot about how to manage challenge, how to overcome challenge. Yeah? Because at the end of the day, the heart of resilience is overcoming and finding meaning to the challenge that they are facing. Yeah? But what is most important here, what I like to highlight in terms of how do we develop the resilient leadership in the new norms that we are in, is that resilience of education system is about system-wide approach. It's the whole institution approach. I'm referring to the wave 4, whereby is to look at the whole interactions process. How can we improve from there? How can we learn from there so that the interaction can be institutionalized, so that everyone is learning the skill of how to overcome and then further and to be more prepared if the challenge come again, either it's environmental challenge, either it's a social challenge, and etc. Yeah? If we look at the case of example of school systems, yeah, not only through the explicit teachings of skills curriculum of coaching, but at the same time we need to set up the ecosystem through the policies, the school goals, and the aspirations. Yeah. And as I was saying just now, is that we need to move totally from the exam-oriented, from that kind of standardized assessments or examination, from a system whereby we prepare and expose to the student the kind of challenge that is actually out there. But is our systems now preparing our students for this? Right? And our students, I would even refer to the university system that prepare the teachers, and then the teachers that prepare the students at the school level. So in short, what I'm trying to say here is that resilient process of building resilience is dynamic and interactive, whereby the relationship between actors and the structures are very critical. That's what I mean by the wave 4 of a kind of resilience building process. Yeah, resilience is not something that we found within, but that is something that emerged as a result of interactions between the systems. And so that's why we need a holistic approach. Yeah? And need for resilience building at all levels. Yeah, we cannot just focusing at one level and this is school systems only. Yeah, but we need to even the nursery level, and then from the school we go to the higher level. Yeah? So the whole system has to be geared towards building resilience. Yeah? So in short, again, what I would like to ponder and give some points for us to think about is resilient leaders must be able to differentiate between education for resilience versus educations about resilience and education resilient. I mean, the system, how resilience is the education system. And we must be able to contextualize the process of building resilient country. There's no one model fits all. Yeah? And resilience above and beyond the individuals, meaning that we've got to look at different levels of society and environment. And we've got to view the world and humanity activity within it more holistically. Yeah? We've got to question the current system, whether it is helping resilience or hindering it. Yeah? So in short, again, one is an important point is to look at systemic approach rather than through targeted resilience building program. Yeah? So this is where you get to see that the whole resilience process, building process in the community are so much interconnected, are so much interdependent. Yeah. And in order to understand and to be able to really develop that system, we need a transdisciplinary understanding. One discipline perspective would not be able to come up with solutions, and to really understand what is actually the context that is needed in order to develop that resilience. And further, I would like to somehow quickly highlight that how the process of building resilience can be carried out. Yeah, we've got to look at the policy challenge. We've got to look at what the messages, structural challenge, social challenge, and financial challenge. So each component would have further detail to it. Yeah? And there are several suggestions, yeah, that you can get many in the literature. You can get many books, many presentations on this. I just share here so that you can quickly have reference to this one. There are several steps and strategies in order to build that resilience in addressing this challenge. I'll go quickly because I have got one last point to somehow get into. So with all this guideline in terms of strategies, how to develop the resilience character, my final argument is to somehow argue for that in order to build this character, it cannot, since we say that there's no one size fits all, but in the Malaysian context, or any particular context, you need the intrinsic or local concept of resilience that need to be embedded, meaning that we have to take into consideration different kind of factors surrounding of that particular context. We cannot say, for example, from developed countries, from different societies that has a different socio-economic background and use that strategies to be adapted to our situation. Cannot. In our case, what I'm trying to say here is that in building the resilience, indigenous source of knowledge, indigenous lifestyle is a possible, should be the important source of knowledge, and how for us to develop that resilience qualities. And by having this local concept, by having this local framework, then only you will be more sustainable, then only you'll be more contextual in terms of developing the kind of school that is not strong enough to face the challenge that is coming. And this concept of sejahtera in the Malaysian in context is something that is very similar to the other countries, whereby in Japan, for example, they've got ikigai, that concept of the sustainable living. You've got lagom and you've got huga or hige in Norwegian and Danish word. Why is it important to have this kind of concept? Is that the importance of contextual ecosystems that is needed can somehow be made understood, be made aware among the students, among the lecturers, among the leaders, if we put it in the context of our own local understandings. And of course, if you want to go a bit more detail, the second argument of why we need to go into the detail of sejahtera, because the meaning of sejahtera is very much close to the two components, ourselves and external factor. Why? Because this article that I share here, Resilient Leadership, Navigating the Pressure of Modern Working Life, highlighted that the most important component is the heart. If we have a strong heart, if we have a prepared heart to somehow face whatever challenge, it can be overcome. So what do I mean by sejahtera leadership or sejahtera component is that we have an internal and external factor. Internally, we are giving emphasis to the spiritual aspect, to the ethical aspect of that particular person and the emotions. And going outside, so these people are not living on their own, they are living a different kind of microcosms beyond their life. That can be divided into four components: the ecology, the economic, the societal, and the cultural. So once they have a very strong, resilient heart, they've got all the characters of resilient qualities within themselves, then only they can impart that character to outside. And that outside means it will present the four components. So these four components is quite nicely illustrated here. And I would end by this slide by saying that education, we know all this what is been the equalizer, but because of the standardization, because of the examination, because of the commercialization of knowledge and etc., it becomes something that's not as leveler like before. It becomes the components that will widen the gap. For that, we need to shift, like I was arguing for before. And when we say to make it based on concept of sejahtera, it has to have the components of emotional, spiritual, intellectual, and physical. The SQ, the IQ, the PQ, and the EQ. So once you have a very strong character of these qualities, this component, you have a very strong personal dimension to it. the self-introspection, the social dimensions to it, and the global dimensions to it. And this is what we mean by a very strong, resilient qualities based on the local concept of sejahtera. Yeah, and I would end by saying that concept of sejahtera, the concept of well-being, the concept of serenity, the concept of tranquility, which if I try to translate it into English, yeah, though it doesn't really convey the right meaning of sejahtera, it's not something new. Yeah, sejahtera has been the objective of the national philosophy of education, right? So for that, I guess what I've shared with you is that how, from the argument of how we need to change the concept of educations that has been happening all this while, COVID has forced the changes, and to what direction we want to change is that we need to reset, we need to look back, we need to move from 4M to 4H, and what will be the basis for that is our own local context of sustainable living. That is sejahtera. With that, thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.